anybody who has an inkling to want to better understand themselves and feels any level of friction in their life, know that alone is like the first step towards moving forward to your truth. And even if it feels really far away, like just that acknowledgement of, I want something different, I want to live differently, and I want to start doing this work is immense. And a lot of people never get there.
I will run, I will rise, I will grow like the world's never known.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Evolution 1, where I talk with artists and creatives around decision making and how they were able to craft the life that they wanted. So today I'm really excited. I know it's been a while, but I was able to talk with Kori, who at the time of the interview, she was the VP of a company called Field Trip, which is one of the leading companies in psychedelic therapy. She was the 10th person hired, and over 18 months, she helped to grow it to 200 employees. She was there when it went public on the NASDAQ and the Canadian Exchange. She also helped develop the app for an at-home psychedelic guidance trip. So since the interview, she's stayed on as an advisor, helping the company. She's also taking on some new projects, so I'm really excited to see and interested to see where she kind of goes with that. So obviously in the interview, we talk about psychedelics and more importantly, her journey through getting to where she is, a lot about decision making and some of the moments that really helped her to create or understand herself better. I think that's one of the things that we really relate on is definitely recognize she's someone that has gotten to a level of, I don't know, of enlightenment or just this way of operating in life that is a very mature and elevated state of mind that I really appreciate. And it was a wonderful time talking with her. She's just an all around beautiful human, and what a joy to have time to be able to talk with her. So we're going to jump right in, and I hope that you enjoy the conversation with Kori.
First off, congratulations on going public, and I can't believe that you were able to work this in with. I'm sure you have so much going on. I had no idea how busy you probably are with everything, but that's incredible. That's really wonderful. What I have so many questions that first off, let's talk about like some timeline in here. So how long were you? It was supposed to be a year off, right? And then that turned into, how long were you doing this consulting gig before you started doing your own stuff? What was that
So
timeline?
I was with I was a software engineer and product manager at the consulting firm for about 2.5 years. And that was in DC and then SF, and then left for about 6 months, self-exploration. And then the consulting company was about 3 years, really just diving deep into building that, and had my own little small team, super scrappy. And it just got to this exhausting point. But then further, I was just really looking to work on something in the psychedelic space and work with the individuals that were building something that was going to be what the world needed. And at that point, there wasn't a whole lot. So Field Trip was this group of 5 founders that came from cannabis, that built a network of clinics in the cannabis space, did that well, really heart-centered, good people. They already had a team of like 10 to 15 that were really great people. So I just had this intuition that like they were going to be the ones to do something powerful and something that the world really needed. And that's what inspired me to join at that point. I didn't think I would ever work for someone again, honestly. I've learned from corporate and the healthcare system that I'm not meant to work for somebody, but thankfully I've had a lot of autonomy, and the founders really trust me, and we have a great team. So it's led to, I guess, the passion behind what I'm doing matters more than anything else for me. And I had that at Field Trip.
That's awesome. How did you transition from, I guess that's probably when you had your agency. I was going to say the, technical engineering to, product lead. Like, what was that journey? How did you make that leap?
Yeah. I wasn't that great of an engineer. So that was kind of the leap was kind of forced. I was just better at product. I really enjoyed design and I still do, thinking about a user experience that is really seamless. Like it gets out of your way and it's almost unnoticeable. Like a technology, like an experience with an interface that just feels like interacting with it's just like solving your problem in a seamless way that you're not thinking about touching that button or going to this screen. It flows. And I just love that. I always have. I was really into graphic design in high school, and that was sort of the impetus of it. Just creating experiences digitally, and how that can, and just the aesthetics behind that, the feeling behind that, and how it impacts how someone leaves the experience and solves their problem. And so I just started doing that organically with the team I worked with, and so it just pushed me more towards that product role of product management with that design focus, and thinking about the user experience. And I've always done better in more oversight roles. I'm not super detail oriented. Like I really like thinking with the 1,000-foot view, and thinking, what problem is this solving, and what is the industry doing, and how can this product or this company solve some problem, and what position does it play in solving that problem. And that's what I really brought into the consulting company too, is that these early stage companies, the founders, they weren't product minded people. Like they had the vision on the company and they knew how to raise money, but as far as executing that and turning that into a digital experience, and
Right.
in a way that people really will receive well, basically translating their vision into the actual product is what I really helped do. And then I find that engineers really like that detail oriented place. So like I was a good in between the founders and the engineers.
Oh my gosh. No wonder I was reading your stuff and just connected. There's so many things. You have no idea how much this really hits home for me. All the things you were saying, it's like a lot of the stuff that I'm navigating as well. It seems like you're doing incredible at it. I'm still early in the process. But one of the things that really caught me that I'm really curious about is, you said you were really into design when you're in high school, right? And so what took you down the technical route and not down, art or design route?
Yeah, well, honestly, like I thought a lot. Like actually wanted to switch to a graphic design major, but it was the voice in the back of my head of the path laid out, that art and graphic design wasn't where the money wasn't where the security was, like all that bullshit that you get from society, parents, East Coast convention, whatever it was, it was just these stories. And so I think that was the biggest reason, like becoming a doctor, and just that really proven path was something that seemed like was the option that was going to be. I don't know, I guess I just didn't even really give myself, it's unfortunate. I think it's still stories that happen today, but I think that is shifting a little bit. I think it's clear how much, we talk about content creators, like it's like such a huge role and need now in the world. And so I think that that's shifting, thankfully, but at least when I was moving into the job world, it was still, it was seen as like not a super secure path. So that was the main reason. And then at that point, I hadn't even really like sunk my teeth into what, like, I didn't know what a UX UI designer was in college.
Yeah.
So I didn't really even understand how you could go out and get a job aligned with the skill set. So it just, to me at that point, was just like a hobby and an interest.
Oh my gosh, the exact same thing that I went through. But wait, I have to ask. I completely forgot that you were going down to become a doctor. How did you then get into development? Like what?
Yeah.
Where are these? Where are the,
Good
connect
question.
these this stuff?
I know. So I studied, my majors were economics and bioengineering. So I was able to lean on those to get this consulting role at a company called Appian. And I, I was like, okay, I'll do consulting. Who knows what the hell consulting is? Like at that point, I sure didn't. My sister was a consultant at Accenture, and it seemed just like this thing that you do, like with an econ and bioengineering degree, which she also had a bioengineering degree. And so the reason why I applied to get that role was because I had a whole year off before med school, and I didn't want to just stay at home. Like I wanted to be independent, get out of my parents' home as soon as possible, and go out into the world and be able to fund myself and have an apartment in DC. And so that was the main reason, like just eager and itching to be independent, and I needed income to do that. And I wanted to live in the city. And this job was like on paper what you do after these majors. And so I applied to Appian and got that role. And it turned out to be a software engineering role, which I was expecting to be a consultant, which at that time I still had zero idea what it was. But so I went to just do, yeah, I got this role as a software engineer. And what they do with people that don't have a background with software engineering is a 3-week boot camp of learning their code. So it's a custom code platform. And it was the hardest 3 weeks of my life. Never written a line of code in my life. And
That's insane.
very difficult. And by the end, you have this app that you deliver and present. And so it was a huge learning process and really cool and really crazy. And from there, I was just sold on technology and thought it was the coolest thing ever, and stayed down that path and withdrew from med school.
Yeah, so I had a very similar kind of path. So I wanted to be a designer, but then I went into school and kind of the same thing that I in the back of my mind, it was don't do art. You're not going to be an artist. Like it's hard to make it. And then I had a cousin who was a designer, and she was just like, it's a really tough, it's a really tough profession. And in hindsight, I'm like, every profession is like competitive and tough. Like but if you love it, like I did, like, why did I shy away from it? But I kind of was doing a lot of the calculations and was like, well, if I get a technical degree, like, that was a big thing for my dad. Get a technical degree and, you'll be okay. Some kind of engineer. And I liked it. I didn't mind it, but it's kind of the same thing where I will say too, that I felt like I really quickly learned that school for me was, I don't want to put down school, but at the same time, I feel like I learned more outside of school, and school is really about the paper that got me the job. But anything that I learned was outside of the classroom, and outside of school. It wasn't the stuff in class that would really helped evolve me or to even in my job get me to where I wanted to go. But I always found myself, even to this day, like just creating. I'm actually a research engineer at my day job, and so I think it's funny. So many of the things that you talk about, I kind of I'm a research engineer, but when I describe myself to people, it's like I'm a design technologist, as I play that role between the technical people and a lot of the business, and being able to do design and work on both teams to collaborate. So there's so much of a connection between your path and what you're talking about and how you went to like it totally resonates with me. So like. Mm-hmm. That's I think really, really, really cool. Before we get too far down, I wanted to back up and ask some questions about growing up, because we kind of glossed over a little bit. But I wanted to ask, like, do you feel like when you were growing up, did you always identify as being creative or an entrepreneur, or yeah, kind of like self-starter? Are these things that you were just like, that's kind of who I am?
I wish I could say that. I feel like every entrepreneur has that cool like lemonade stand story. Um, I've always really been a product of my environment. And so I was really driven by that just conventionality that was my small town. But what I did have is this deep restlessness that I mentioned of like just knowing there's something more, but just not knowing what that was. And my environment being my only way to know what that was. And so that restlessness and that desire to feed it and understand where it was coming from really sparked this travel bug that I've had in me since I was a little kid. And growing up, our vacations were really like just North Carolina, like going to the beach, really simple. But thankfully in college, I was able to travel abroad and study abroad in Amsterdam for 6 months. So that was one of the biggest, I think, door openers for me to start understanding what this bigger is that I felt in me and starting to actualize it for myself and starting to create my own perspectives that weren't driven by my small town and that were cultural and diverse and driven by just what's possible and just different ways of living and being that I hadn't been exposed to up until that point. So I would say I had that restlessness and then also just this intense observer in me. I've always, like you say you are, is I've always been extremely interested in other people. And I tend to just, I find a lot of my life has kind of felt like I'm like sitting outside a snow globe looking in, which there's downsides to that. You know, a lot of times it's like this lonely space of just kind of watching what's going on. But I've just been always this very curious mind and just will, like a lot of my mom loved home videos growing up. And so I was always just the little one in the corner, kind of watching with curiosity what my sisters and brother were doing or reading a book or, that curiosity and observing nature.
Can you hear that? I'm sorry.
There's you have like it? I have it going on here too.
Oh, okay. I was like, there's a fire truck like right outside of my window and it's okay. It passed. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. So yeah, that's what I would say to that. I think that those were both impetuses to the entrepreneurial world. And I'm just extremely grateful I found it. I don't think I meant for anything else. That scrappy 0 to 1 operating from first principles, not paradigms, is who I am. It's all I know. And it's just been my path.
I really want to hover around this. This is like the core. So much of what you're saying is like the core of, 3V and live life intentionally. Like the whole stuff that I do is I was youngest of 6 and exactly the same. Like I was always observant. I think, like you said, I think is a good way to explain it. I didn't feel like I was definitely not swayed by what other people had to say. Like I had a very strong personal opinion of like, and it was, I don't even know where I got it, but I felt very strongly like that I was making my own decisions and I didn't just take what other people said. But at the same time, I didn't have a lot of diversity coming in. But I was the youngest of 6 and I was really keen on watching each of my brothers and sisters kind of graduate high school. And as they kind of transition through life, I just can't, I look at how people kind of were acting and learned a lot. I tell a lot of people this story. I didn't realize how much of a I don't know, a power or like a way that my mind works, and how beneficial it is. But I went to Hawaii and surfed for the first time. And I remember, if you've ever surfed, like they tell you the whole, like, here's how it works when you're on the beach. And then you go out to like, it's like this little, like 5 or 10 minute, here's how to surf, and you practice and then you go out there. And the first thing I did when I went out, just subconsciously, it was, they were asking me afterwards, like because I was able to stand up on my second route. And the way that my mind works is I went out and I went tried for the first time and failed. And in my mind, it's like, okay, I have reference to what that feels like to just like go and do it. And then when I went back, when I was looking at waves, I started watching other people surfing. Like, what is it? How were they catching it? What were they looking for? How were they standing up? And it was so much observation that was happening that then translated into, okay, now I'm ready to go. And I was able to kind of catch on really quickly. And I just think that people feel self-conscious about they feel like other people are looking at them, but the truth is nobody's really looking at you. Nobody cares what you're doing. And you can learn a lot from just seeing how other people are acting. And not that you have to do it, but you could say like, again, it goes back to how people make decisions. Like, what were they looking for? Like, how did they move their body? Like those little things. And I just think like, it sounds very similar to kind of what you're talking about, of just being observant, taking action, and then making assessments that lead back into the next decision. And that very much connects with kind of my story and my journey. And I think one of the big things that you talked about, to kind of circle back to it, sorry, I kind of go off on tangents here, but when you were talking about like growing up with a very much a narrative of what life was, or what you were, supposed to do at these levels in life. And that's like the whole point of the, 3V, is to help show that there's multiple paths. There's not one path. And if you're open to experiencing life, things will unfold. And you don't have to, when you don't have a book, a lot of times when you're younger, you do what you've been told. And so I try to show different paths to say everyone is just trying to make it themselves, and be open to trying those new things and being uncomfortable, because that's when you'll really, like, I think you were saying it too, like, what is it that I feel now that I'm away from home and nobody's there to tell me what to do? What do I want to do? How do I operate? And embracing that awkwardness, I think, is such a power that young people shy away from most of the time, I see. But it's really, I don't know, I just think it's really, really powerful. Am I getting too far off of what I was sensing? It seemed like there was like a connection. Maybe I was forcing it, but does that resonate with what you were kind of sharing?
I mean, I think what's important, at least for me, is just the regular inward lens that has completely redirected my life down that path that is my truth. And I think we have an inner truth and inner purpose, and it's about shedding the layers that are built on and painted on from our parents, the way we're brought up, our environment. And it's an ever evolving thing. It's something that we need to regularly do. Having a monthly reflection, definitely a yearly reflection, looking back on what you did that month, that year, and then what you hope to do the next, is like giving yourself that time and space to listen to your own heart, what's coming up for you, and how do you feel? Do you feel balanced? Do you feel good in this job? Do you feel good in this relationship, in this city? And just asking yourself those questions, rather than, just jumping on a train and letting it move forward and just accepting that's where you are. I think that inward lens is crucial to regularly check into that truth and then calibrate your life. Like, you might find your truth in 1 month, and the next month it changes, and then having the courage to regularly change it. And it's not always easy. Change is difficult. It changes a chaos between periods of order, but chaos is a part of life. And the burn down the forest so flowers can grow, like, that's a reality. And it's you can either like go about your life like accepting that train that you're on, or you can really live a life aligned with your truth. And there's so much more beauty to that. And at least for me, I would say the chaos and the pain that's associated with change and regular self-reflection is worth it. And I've found that the portals of psychedelic medicine and meditation and just regular mindfulness and self-awareness is really important for regularly checking on that.
So before we get into the psychedelics, I want to go there in a second, but I wanted to hover around. I really love that you were talking about kind of self-awareness and taking a pause and checking in with yourself. One of the things that I'm curious what you think about this, but one of the biggest ways that really helped me to kind of like get to my last magazine, volume 35, was titled Becoming Fully Me. And it's been a journey to do exactly what you're talking about. So like, who is it that, what is the life that I really want to, what do I want to do with my time? Who am I? Like some of those questions that you don't really, for me, I started asking in the late 20s, and I was kind of waking up, and I describe it to people as a second puberty of going like, what am I doing? Like, how did I get here? And what I'm trying to get back to and ask you the question around is, with that self-reflection, to me, I think it's really important not to be unemotional, but to be unjudgmental about what comes up when you self-assess. Like, don't be afraid. For me, it was like, I think a lot of times you feel like you shouldn't feel this way. We get a lot of these stories that it's like, oh, I should want this. Like, I should want these things. But if you don't, like, it needs to be a moment where you can let yourself really feel what it is that you feel without you putting these barriers back on to say, well, like, I'm a bad person, or any of those titles, to just fully let yourself be, and it with zero judgment of it being good or bad. It just is what's in you. And once you identify it and feel it, then you can start shaping it. But until you get to the point where you are not perceiving yourself in a certain way, I think it's hard to kind of break through that. Can you talk to that a little bit about like not burdening yourself when you're in this self-assessment? I don't know. Have you dealt with that, or does that resonate?
Yeah, I mean, that's the ego dissolution that can be extremely powerful on the path to looking inward, and knowing that what comes up when we do spend that time in our inner space is purely just another piece of phenomena in this existence we're in, just like this computer or the sun or the wind. It's just the idea that our thoughts and our feelings are just a thing in the universe and they're not us, and not identifying with them is the practice. And even just looking at a feeling, like we label things as good or bad, but feelings are just energy. They're different frequencies of energy, and maybe we put labels on them because of the resonance that we sense. But really, if you can look at it and really spend time looking at it, even if you're like feelings of like physical pain or super cold or super hot, like all of that is just energy and vibration. And you can think about your thoughts and your like what comes up when you're trying to do that inner work as just phenomena. And Ram Dass talks about this, Alan Watts talks about this, the idea of there really is no form, and we're all just vibrating particles. And you can go really deep into that quantum space, and psychedelics will definitely help you do that. But I would say for maybe people earlier in the journey, just doing their best to look at it, like be that objective observer. And when the thoughts come up, just almost like you can even like name it out loud, so that it puts this distance between you and the thought. And the you that's perceiving the thought is your inner truth. Like that is eternal consciousness. That is something that we all have, and it's really just the same thing. And the thoughts and feelings that come up are just phenomena in this existence, and it is not you. That is how you have the courage to move forward and regularly change yourself. Because if you have attachment behind the thoughts and the identities, I am a doctor, I am a lawyer, XYZ, then then you grip to it, and it's hard to let it go even if it doesn't feel like your truth. That gripping is the loosening of that grip is the practice and the work, and that is what the regular self-reflection is based on.
Yeah. And I think you, if you're, one of the struggles that I was finding in myself was that it was the struggle with myself of not allowing me to be me, because I had a perception of what me should be based on other people's opinions, right? Like, and it's being able to separate from that. And so for you, was to get to that level, were you able to do that prior to the psychedelics, or does the psychedelics just enhance the ability that you were doing? Like, what's that level? Is it only psychedelics that help you get there?
I've always had a deep intuition, and I've always been very sensitive. But I think for most of my life, I really smothered that, because the idea that I had to be strong, that was one of my big stories. I'm strong. I'm not emotional. Feelings are weak. And so I smothered that intuition, and that those feelings that were really, our feelings are our teachers. They tell you whether or not you're in alignment. And if you are a sensitive person, if you are an empath, or you're really in tune to your environment and other people and yourself, then that's a superpower, and it's something to not smother, and it's not weakness. So I think psychedelics really help me embrace that side of me, and know that it comes with a lot of waves and ups and downs in life, but it enables me to have this really closeness to that teacher and that inner guide that tells me whether or not I'm aligned with my truth in any moment, or if someone's right for me, or if a partner is right for me, if a city is right for me, if traveling, just letting my intuition come forth and guide me in life with decisions. And the more, like, psychedelics definitely get you closer, really close to that, or at least closer to that, even if you weren't intuitive or sensitive beforehand, because of just how opening it is, and it sheds a lot of the walls and paradigms that cover that intuition. So yes, it was there before. Psychedelics are really just the portal, but they can be really powerful to help us break through the for some of us, like, really thick concrete walls that hide it.
It's a tool. And I think for so long, like when we talk about narratives growing up, it was always, bad, the labels of, like, it's always this negative thing. It's kind of connected with, like, laziness and negative life choices. And what we're learning, I think, and in talking with you, it seems like it's really going back to what you're talking about, being like energy. Like, it's like a computer can be used for bad. Like all these things can be a negative thing, or they could be used to help us as humans to unlock pieces in us, whether that be creativity or mental capacity, or challenges that we've had. Really need to start looking at it as tools. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I like to think about it like my inner guide, and allowing it to come forth in this way is like, it's this separate teacher that tells you what's going on and what you need, and having that portal opened regularly so that you let its voice come forth. And you can do that in so many ways: breathwork, meditation, just self-awareness. If you have that, if you cultivate like a really close connection to the portal, like through psychedelic medicines, over time you can just kind of find it on your own without the medicine. But I do think that it's how people can live a life aligned with their truth. Like our internal guide knows that, and that's why we feel good or bad with certain things. That's why we have a personality or preferences or passions, and that's why we all have different set of those things. It's because we each have our own inner being, and like let's bring that forth. That's what we're meant to do.
Well, I think another thing too that I wanted to kind of bring up as well is you kind of talked about this. We think our minds I think have a very finite thought process to them, or maybe it's the narratives that we had. But especially in your 20s, I felt like there were so many things that I was like, now I'm an adult, now I'm in college, like now I'm an adult. Oh, okay. Yeah, like all these level stones, and you're waiting for that moment when you've arrived and you are, this adult, or this thing that you've been thinking, you are finally get that job, whatever's on the horizon. And or even just like the partner that I have, like recognizing that things do ebb and flow, and even though it's right, it could be right for the moment, and that moment might need, people will come in and out of your life, careers will come in and out, a lot of things are going to kind of flow, and I'm not the same person that I was at 20, right? Like I've experienced things, but also like just who I am and the stage I'm in, like mentally, has evolved and changed, and I need to. For me, one of the hard things was, we always talked about like puberty being when you're in your teens and you go from not being able to have kids to physically being able to have kids, like this unlock, that's puberty. But what I've realized is that it's really like every 10 years, you really start shifting physically, mentally, emotionally into this next stage. And each one of those, to me, I keep saying, is another level of puberty, where you're just like, the first one is the one we always talk about, but we don't prepare people for the fact that you're going to be different at 30 than we talk about it, but we don't really conceptualize and realize you're prepared for different things at these stages. Am I making any sense? Does that connect with kind of what, anything that resonates with you? I feel like for me, that's been kind of a big thing, that nothing's really that as finite as we thought when we were younger, and getting to the point where you open up to it being okay for whatever amount of time it needs to be was a really big moment for me. Have you kind of experienced that, or does that make any sense?
Every 7 years, you literally become a new set of cells. So yeah, I would say for sure we change. And you'll look at those 7-year cycles, you can probably find in your life that every 7 years you really feel like you're a whole different being, and physically that's true. So why not in every other aspect is it true? Yeah.
Wow.
So it's definitely, that's why we say it's a journey, it's not an end goal. It's a regular check-in, and it's just a process. It's a never ending process and practice. And you could say it's a game, like you could even treat it like that. It's fun, it's just, we're all in this cosmic dance together. Like having this self-awareness is like, if you want to play that game, I would recommend it. Not everybody likes that. Some people just like who are living on the surface and just being rather than thinking about being. Like I totally understand that. And sometimes I feel like that could be really great, but my mind just doesn't work that way. So this regularly checking into myself and always calibrating my life to my truth is my journey in the path that is it never ends, and there isn't that end goal. And that shift has been huge for me, because I have always been on this just Ferris wheel of forward, forward, forward. Like my favorite quote used to be, sacrifice what you are for what you want to become. And so everything I would do, every moment, every little like beautiful string of present moments that, like Ram Dass would say, the now is all there ever is. Like all of that was filled up with just energy around trying to get somewhere. And it's really unfortunate to live your life that way, because when do you ever get to that place where you just enjoy it and you're just there? And it just doesn't happen. If you're too wrapped up in that, it will never happen. It will always be the next thing. And so a huge shift for me that is a regular practice and not easy, not my default at all, is just being here and just not resisting anything in this moment, being completely okay with this moment, and knowing that the now is literally all there ever is, and we are only ever going to be in this moment. And it's hard to think about it that way, because we're such, the idea of time is such an embedded in our psyche. And psychedelics really do help melt that. So it is cool. Like, I mean, people find in the LSD or psilocybin space that they have no sense of time, and that deep presence feeling can be so empowering, and you can take that into your life after the trip. So it's a beautiful. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, when you talk about being here, I mean, that's a huge thing for me too, like being present and mindfulness. What are some of the tools that you use to like get to that every day, to be like, what are those practices that you use to be able to get to that? Because I agree, I think that that's huge at a daily level, to a reminder.
Yeah. Well, I think, my mornings are sacred. I start my mornings with 30-minute meditation, and usually like 25-minute manifesting and prayer. And that really helps center me. It's a buffer into my day. It allows me to start my day from such an intention, because I speak to what I'm calling in and what I'm manifesting in my life. And I also just sense into a lot of the gratitude I have for what I already have. It's not only wanting to manifest new, it's rooting in the gratitude I have for this moment and all that I've come to. And so that morning practice is really powerful. I also really enjoy physical movement, dance, exercise, because it just is one of the few things that really does turn my mind off and gets me really embedded in the now without really a choice behind it. It's very organic. But I think otherwise, it's just throughout my day, I really try to have that. Sometimes I just kind of zoom out and just kind of tune into my senses. I breathe and I feel that breath. I feel my skin on what I'm touching. I smell the air, and just tuning into your senses can really ground you in the now. And the best teachers for that, I would say, is Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, and Stillness Speaks, those books. And just having those audibles, like those can be on repeats on days I really need them. And it's a great way to just have that reminder, because it's definitely not what our society is built around at this point.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I think I think one of the key things that I want to point out is, a lot of times when I talk to people, they have the idea that, it's like this big thing that you have to go do, or there's something around it. And I love that you just said, like, just like recognizing like what you're touching. Like these are all things that like are big for me. I think walks, like feeling the air on my face, and I breathe and just say, like, I'm alive right now. I'm do photography and videography, and so like when I'm walking, I like literally like, I'm like, this is real time. Like my eyes are cameras, and like what I'm looking at, I'm very attuned to what's going on. It's things like that where you don't like, a lot of stuff you're talking about, you don't have to go anywhere, you don't have to get any equipment. It's about just like, it's not about out, it's about coming in and being still, and recognizing what's going on. And it's like I like how you said, it's not my default. Like that was a great way to explain it. Because I think, again, it goes back to like thinking that once you achieve something, that you're always at that level. And that's not really how we are as humans. It's not like, oh, now I'm, live life intention. It's like, oh, you must be intentional all the time. It's like, no, it's a mantra to like remind myself that life is happening, and it'll slip away if you don't make conscious choices. Like you will make choices, but they will be subconscious, and sometimes that's fine. But as well, as long as you're, in the moment of making them subconscious, you know what I mean? Like I'm just gonna let this thing happen, kind of thing. But I like that you were kind of saying like it's not, it's more attainable than people think. And that's what I wanted to bring it back to, is I like how you kind of explained it, is it's something that anybody could do at any point, when you just recognize that. For me, I have a lot of ADD. And so like when things feel like frantic, I kind of go into that mode where I have too many like sensory overloads, and I'm thinking too far out, and I need to like be aware of what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a shift from doing to being that is is really crucial for that equanimity and finding that inner peace and inner stillness that we all have. But, we fill it with work, and I'm busy. I have stuff to do. I have people to see. I have chores to get done. I have errands to run. Like, there's always something to do. And we can be in that busy, frenetic place. But a lot of times that is running from that inner voice that really wants to be heard and held and listened to, and going into that receiving space of just literally sitting with yourself. Like, it's very simple, and it takes 10 minutes. I would recommend more if you can, but definitely like start somewhere. And everybody has 10 minutes, and giving yourself that time could be an absolute game changer for your day, because receiving and true insight comes in that rest. It doesn't come from doing. That if you try to find insight and creativity and inspiration from a place of doing, it's only going to come from the paradigms you already have. It's not going to come from your inner truth and inner guide.
Well, that's really interesting. I want to push back on that for a minute. The reason that kind of like resonates with me is because I'm someone who has to move to think. And so when you say it's in the process of doing that, a lot of things unfold for me. But maybe I'm thinking too literal about it, like, because you said you can't be doing to kind of hear yourself, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say really try to sit with yourself, see what happens. Like, it's I used to feel the same, like, and exercise was my way to open that portal. But when I've really, and sometimes the hardest thing is where the most growth can come. And so if you say that you have the frantic ADD, like, I wonder what's sitting with yourself and just letting all those voices come up and just be there, and letting them be there, letting them be there, letting them be there. And at a certain point, there a quietness starts to come, and there's a lot of beauty that can happen there if you really give it that space. I mean, everyone's different. I'm speaking to what I've learned, and the teachers I love to lean on. But I mean, however you get to that space of peace, like if it feels like peace for you, that's all that really matters. And whatever that looks like for you, it's your practice.
And by pushing back, I didn't mean that you're, again, I don't really operate in, I think anytime you operate in extremes, I think it's a dangerous place. And so I wasn't saying you're wrong, I'm right. I was more making the point that I think it's more like a balance. I think that there's moments where I'm definitely need to stop, and it's not about doing, it's about being. And then there's some points where the doing helps me get unblocked. And by doing, I mean, like, even just like getting, like I said, like getting up and going on a walk and being out in nature and making shifts. And so it's, again, I think it comes back to what you've talked about, like self-awareness of recognizing it's not a, like every time I do, for me, it's not a, every time I do this and it works, like I push this button and this thing happens. It's more of like, I have a bag of tools that I can use. I'm going to try a few things to see what's working in the moment. Maybe that's sitting, maybe that's going up and doing. And I'm saying this as someone who's listening could be like, well, I have to, like, don't attach to like one thing and think that it has to be everything. I think we're talking about tools that have helped us that we can use at any given moment, right? It's just like in basketball, there's not just like one, and there's the basics, but then you build on top of the, I'm getting away from what I was talking about. I don't even know where I'm going anymore. I went down a rabbit path, but what I was saying is that it's a bag that it matters how you feel, and try to sit with yourself. And if that kind of gets you in this space, great. If not, then don't be afraid to, at least for me, it's, I've learned it's more of a balancing act of sensing myself, of like, what is it that I need? Like, I think you talked about this too. I think, my body's trying to talk to me. It's trying to, like, me is trying to communicate with me, subconscious me, trying to communicate with me, and I'm trying to like get myself out of the way and listen. Like, is it this? Maybe it's that, and be a lot more flexible. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify. I wasn't pushing back on the everything.
Oh yeah, don't worry about that. Yeah, no ego here.
I think that you know what, that's when you talked about psychedelics melting away the ego. I think that you really just like hit it for me too. Like I have, and I get the sense that that's kind of like you and I operate in a very similar space of like I'm fine with who I am, and that ego part, it's not gone. Like it still serves its purpose, but at the same time, it doesn't. What I keep trying to tell, like I talk to my kids about, it doesn't have to drive. It, you know, it could be present, and it could be, you know, collaborating in how I make decisions, but it's definitely not where I need to be in the driver's seat making the decisions. It's but it's around, and I think it gives useful information. But with that, I wanted to kind of turn and say, like, what is, we've talked about it a little bit here, but I'm interested in hearing what's your framework for making decisions. Because coming back, like I really believe that people are capable of achieving the life they want. They just don't realize that it comes at how you make decisions. And so like for you, looking back and seeing all these little decisions have brought you to create the life that you have, and to create the success, not just from a career, but success in understanding who you are, what you need, what you want to navigate. So I'm curious how you describe your framework for making decisions. Like, what is the process for that helps you to be able to continue to uncover who it is that you want to become?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely shifted. It used to be much more from the masculine energy of that logic driven, data driven, externally driven, of looking at Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, and that's success, and that's what I need to do. And let me take the milestones needed to get there. And that, thank God, shifted to the feminine energy of just receiving. I talk a lot about that receiving, that the intuition and the feeling and that inner guide. And now it's not even a framework. It's how I feel about anything. It's how I feel about the hires I'm going to bring in. It's the decisions on product and what the UI and UX feels like, and what direction we should go. Of course, we need that data driven perspective to come in with certain decisions, and I tend to lean on more masculine energy people for that, and really try to bring in my intuition and feeling energy into it, because that's what feels best for me. And I think that's the value that I can really bring, the highest leverage value I can bring. And I think that that's actually the deepest source of truth and wisdom that is often neglected in society, is just our inner intuition that knows so much more than this thinking mind that our cortex knows. And so it's listening to the body, it's listening to that inner guide, and just seeing what springs up from there. And so I'll tune into that, and if I don't have clarity in that moment, I'll just let it rest. And often, like, it'll bubble up in a moment of meditation or on a walk or during exercise. It'll just like bubble up, and then be like, yes, that's it. And so just trusting that and really leaning into that and not forcing. Like, it's amazing how once you start doing this path that or making decisions from that perspective, our life really is meant to flow downstream. Like, it's not meant to be swimming upstream and like getting up and what you have to do that day. Like, if it feels like a constant force swimming upstream, take a look at what you're doing. And the same thing with decisions. If it feels like a force, it feels like you're shoving something into where it's not ready, then it's probably not going to turn out the way you hope. And that feeling of like, it's just going to be a feeling in you, like, yes, it's right. Yes, it's time. And it's hard to really put that into words, but I think everybody can kind of understand what intuition feels like when it hits. And just letting that come forth and giving it the space to be heard is what I do.
That's so powerful. It really reminds me. I was talking about basketball because my youngest son has started to play, and that's almost like the essence of what I was telling him about. Because we go out and play, and he's 8, and so when he can't make shots, he's like, I'm terrible, I'm no good. And I'm like, listen, Luca, it's not about making the shot. Like, the shot doesn't actually matter. It's about feeling what it's like to make a shot, like recognizing the sense of playing basketball, because that's what's going to come into a game. And like, he doesn't recognize that, like, it doesn't matter if you miss that shot. Like, knowing there's so much feeling that happens in reactions when you're playing sports that I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, it's how I operate. It's really getting a sense of how you move and how, like, you're correcting for things. And I'm trying to help him understand, like, how you, and going back to life, like how you play the game. Like, when you're doing these things, if something's not fitting, then try something else. And listening to the sense of how you operate is the game. Like paying attention to those feelings, I think, is really, really, really important. So again, it's not that you accomplish the thing, it's so that the sense of what it feels like to play, like to do it. Like, oh, that's what it feels like. One of the big things that I have in all of my magazines is, when you feel inspired, when I feel inspired, I have to act. And to me, growing up, it was recognizing the sense of inspiration and and acting on it. Like, if I get acquainted with that, then knowing what that feels like, and after each kind of decision, being able to take a retrospect and be like, did it get the outcome? Then, was I listening to the right thing? Like, that's what I was trying to fine tune, because that's what's going to get you to the next level. Is I'm really big on the sensing and feeling. And I think there's a lot more that happens that we can't verbally communicate or visually see. There's so many nuances that are underneath a lot of what happens, that I think it's really important to into it, like you were talking about.
Yeah.
So I kind of like spun off. It just really hit home in recently of things that kind of I've been thinking about. One of the other things that I wanted to talk about was a lot of questions I like to ask was, what are habits that helped you become successful to where you are? Like, and also what's a habit that helped you get there? And then what's a habit that you didn't have that you had to learn? So one of each.
Interesting. Okay. I think that intuition, I gotta go back to that. But specifically into people, like really having an empathy for other people's perspectives, and that observer nature that I have in me, and that curious nature of really trying to see things from other people's lens, so that you can really meet them where they are, and understand what drives them, what motivates them, what interests them. It's empowered me with getting roles, but also hiring, choosing right partners for different forms of content, or partnerships in the business. That sort of intuition into human beings, and just what matters to them and how they see the world, and just not only intuition, but like interest in that, and if my intuition doesn't pick up on it, if they feel like really different from me, then I'm curious, I'll ask questions. And just that I would much rather hear about someone else than speak about myself, because I know myself. So why would I share that? I'm doing that here because we're on an interview, but for the most part, like, I think I really enjoy learning about other people's lives. And that's really helped me. It's also brought in amazing people, like a tribe of people that think this way and care, like think intentionally and live consciously. So I've been really grateful for that. And I just think that everything in life is people, I think dreams are really an indicator, like a microcosm to what we care about. And at least for me, all of my dreams are like a bunch of people, and in community, and in working with people I love and spending time with people I love and like resonate with. I mean, that's life. That's the core. That's the essence of being a human being, being a social creature, and really longing for that connection. So it's what's led to success in whatever form. Like, I guess my form of success is being surrounded by people that I love and unconditionally. Us just wanting to care for each other, and they care for me in a way that isn't transactional. And I bring that into work too. Like I don't. The way I approach partnerships and like going to lunch meetings, it's like getting to know them as a human being, and knowing that like our work is our life. Like it's very interwoven. It is our life. Like, think of how much time we spend working. So I want to do that with people that I resonate with. And so that's been a good guide in helping that come to fruition for me. And as far as what I had to learn, I think a lot of it is around, this is an interesting one. Delegating is the biggest thing. I've always been such a doer and taking things on my shoulders, and very much a perfectionist, that my standards are so absurdly high for myself, let alone for other people. So I tend to just want to do things myself because I'm just used to taking things on, and I'd rather see through that standard of quality. But you can only do so much if it's only you working on something and you reach this threshold. And so it takes a real skill to build a team, and then train that team and build systems that's going to most empower them to feel motivated to do good work. And so I've really been learning that leadership skills and delegation skills, but also, again, bring in that human element of always checking in with my team. How do you guys feel? Like, do you like what you're doing? Making sure that we're bringing in people that are aligned with the work, that they're doing things that make their heart sing, and knowing that if they're not at any point, that we should calibrate, because good work comes out of people that love what they do. And so I put a lot of care into trying to build those leadership skills, and that was something that wasn't organic for me, because I was always just kind of an independent doer in all my work. And that's what I learned, and that's, I think, what my personality was built for. And I've just tried to expand that.
Oh, that was great. I think a lot of people can resonate with that. And the reason I asked this question is I like to help people realize that the things that you're really great at, like, they will help you in succeeding. That's why I asked, like, what helped you get here? Like, people are always they always focus on, I need to be better at these things. And I am a big believer of, I'm going to like triple down on the things that I'm really great at. And it's not to say that I won't work at these other things, but like, I excel in these areas. And why am I need to spend more energy, because it's giving me a lot more ROI on things that I want to do in life. But then, like you were saying, in doing that, there's natural things that are going to come out of leaning into those good things. You're going to go, hey, here's these areas that I need to work on that maybe I wouldn't have identified, but because I was excelling in these areas, I did have to learn these habits. And so you need both sides, but I like to showcase, because everyone has something else, something different of, what are the habits that got them there. And that's, I think, at a macro level, what I'm trying to help people understand, bring that greatness, and don't be afraid that as you're, leaning into it, that other things are going to expose themselves, and you go, wow, I'm actually glad that was exposed, and now I'm going to work on that, and it's going to help me be better in the things that I'm good at.
Yeah, definitely carve your own path based on your superpowers. And
yeah, I just have a few more. One of the last ones I like to ask too is, it's kind of a cliche one, I might say, but what is, if you had a moment to sit down with your teenage self and you walked into a room, what would you say to your teenage self?
Oh my God, that's a good one, because I'm laughing because, oh my God, it's been such a journey since then. I would say to her, everything's gonna be okay. You're good. I think I was always so hard on myself up until really the past year, just that Ferris wheel, like always having to be better, 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 and just so hard on myself. And just like, I can't imagine what like if I had the self-awareness I have now then, like I can't imagine what the voice in my head was. Just very lacking in self-love, um, uh, and just obsessed with growth to levels that like I wasn't even ready for at that stage in my life. So I think I would just say, trust, be patient, like you're perfect just the way you are, like this is a journey, like let it flow and enjoy the ride. And I think one other thing is just my longing for external validation, like just needing other people to tell me I was good and not being able to tell that to myself. I just kind of rooted in that lack of self-love. And just really, I would try to give her that love that she was seeking from external forces, and telling her that all of that is in her, and we have the deepest love we'll ever need in us, and that is the best love you can ever receive because it's yours. And it's definitely been a path finding that out, so it would have been nice to hear it then, but everything happened as it was meant to.
Yeah, no, that's I think extremely valuable. Like that's really wonderful. There was one thing that came to my mind as you were talking that I remembered I wanted to circle back to. You had talked about earlier in your career, you had a I'm trying to like think of the words. I don't know if you said masculine, but it was around like the energy that you were thinking you needed to be that way. Do you recall that? I don't remember exactly, but it was you were thinking it needed to be this way, but it was when you started giving into like more of the feminine side and the feeling. And so I'm curious, what drove that side? Was it a woman being in that world trying to like step into that role and feeling like you had to meet them at that and not giving in yourself? What do you think led you to have that sense of needing to have masculinity and bring it?
Yeah, I mean, it was again the force of my environment, being in the tech world, and the definition of success being very masculine in the sense of not just male, but even women that are leaders in tech are very masculine. There's a deep lacking in feminine energy in the tech world, as well as just the greater capitalist world. We are in more of a patriarchal society. That's the reality, and it's been that way for decades. So it came from that, and just being really obsessed with being the best at anything I do, and just looking around at who's the best at in my field, and seeing that they're all very masculine people. And so just trying to play that game and play that role, and smothering my femininity in the meantime, seeing that as weakness because I just didn't have any evidence of femininity helping you succeed on this path. And so that's how it got me, boxed into becoming more in that energy. And of course, that didn't feel good for me at all. I'm very feminine at my core, and smothering that side of me was really difficult. And just being in that rigid state led to just a lot of compensating on in other areas of my life, seeking control in other areas of my life, like food and exercise. So I struggled with an eating disorder, and just a lot of rigidities around every aspect of my life that was outside of work as well. So it was harmful in a number of ways. And I think that all those things kind of built up to this breaking point of realizing I needed a change and not quite sure what that was yet. So the introduction to caring about my mental health, creating that inward lens, and then ultimately psychedelic medicine really helped bubble up this truth that had been smothered for so many years, and help me start getting back in touch with that feeling, that sensing, that intuition, that femininity and expressive self that was so far gone for a while. And once I started living that, and just like, you know, with courage and fearlessness of like, I'm going to bring this into my work, you know, I'm just going to live this because it's my truth. And it's done more good for my life and my work and my team than like pigeonholing myself into the masculine ever did. Because number one, I think because it's my truth, and number two, because everything in life is that duality, and we need to all have that level of balance in us, of the giving, receiving, the feeling and doing, the feminine and masculine. And if we don't have that balance, then the pendulum can just swing too far one way, and then it'll end up swinging the other way, and it'll just be this chaos. And so that finding that balance has been really powerful for me.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you feel like that was going to the masculine side, was that a subconscious choice just based on viewing other people, or did you consciously say like, I need to be this thing? You know what I'm saying? Was it, or what level was it? Was it just looking around and seeing it and feeling like you need to do that? Or was it you going like, I need to be this? Like,
yeah, it was definitely an active decision. You know, I mean, the essence of masculine is that pointed acting, doing, you know, it's not passive. It's not intuition based. It's like, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to have a checklist and to-do list, and I'm going to read this book, and I'm going to take this class. And yeah, it was very action oriented and like milestone based. I'm going to check off these boxes. And that was a lot of it was reading so many books about, you know, founders and what success is in that context of being a tech leader, and just really embedding that in my psyche, and just starting to embody it, starting to become it, like just living the way they lived, doing the things they did, and just ultimately living a life that was not mine, based on these words on a page. And so that's how it presented in my life.
Oh man. I think I appreciate you kind of talking about that. I think about that a lot. I have a daughter, and you know, I'm I shouldn't say very aware, but I think about a lot of those things because, you know, she's going to have to navigate the world, and I'm trying to help give her tools now as a young girl to like, yeah, she's an artist, and I'm just like trying to reinforce things so that that she won't get tucked, and my boys too, but I specifically, you know, see society and how we viewed women, and like you were saying, I've definitely seen that being in the tech world too, that to make it, even as a female, you have to, you know, like match this, you know, this level of masculinity, and that's not getting to the essence of who people are. And so I don't know, I just appreciate you answering that. More of, for me, thinking of my daughter and, you know, things that she can do, and I guess any of the young girls, I think it's important to have these conversations, so they recognize people like yourself that have navigated it and kind of giving back. And I hope, I don't know, that's my thought of that question. I hope some other girls are watching that and recognize that some of it is conscious, and some of it's subconscious, of just being in the area and it taking over. All right. So sorry, in closing, I kind of like hit most of the ones. I don't know if there's anything, any like last insights or things that you wanted to mention, or anything like that that we didn't hit on yet.
No, I would just say that anybody who has an inkling to want to better understand themselves and feels any level of friction in their life, know that alone is like the first step towards moving forward to your truth. And even if it feels really far away, like just that acknowledgement of, I want something different, I want to live differently, and I want to start doing this work is immense. And a lot of people never get there. And so there's a lot of resources out there for you. Psychedelic medicine, I think, is the most powerful lever in mental health. There's more and more clinics popping up that offer those sort of services, but regulations are also changing. And I think ultimately we'll be able to work with these medicines at home. But if there's any guidance that I can provide or insight or support, please let me know. Go to my website and shoot me a note. I am always of service to this mission and trying to empower other people to find their truth, find their balance, and live a conscious, aware, heart-centered life.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you so much.